Creative Babble.
I'm holding hands with Jane Whaley. Let that sink in for a minute. I'm about to experience what few reporters ever have, a Word of Faith Fellowship service. Honestly, I don't even know what to expect. I mean, everything's happening so fast. Just yesterday, I was camping outside of my front yard, and this morning, I'm holding hands with Jane Whaley.
Have you ever been to charismatic churches?
You know, I have, but it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while.
What about TV? Have you watched them on TV?
Yeah, I've seen them on TV.
The music gets louder and louder as we approach the sanctuary.
I was raised Baptist. My husband was raised Methodist. We've been Presbyterian, so we've been a little. But now we just want to worship God and praise Jesus. Just let the love of God flow.
From what I can tell, it looks like a packed house. I mean, people are spilling out of the main sanctuary and into the hallway. This must be what a football team feels like right before they run out of the tunnel. I asked Jane if I can record, and she said no. She said she would like to get to know me first, and that we would talk privately after the service. I said fair enough, and I turned off my recorder. From this moment on, I only recorded the music, and only the music. After all, I promised Jane no tricks. I'm Javier Leyva, and this is Pretend Radio, Season 3, The Prophet. Unfortunately, I tried to convince Jane to do a recorded interview, and she refused. After service, we sat down in her office and spoke for an hour and a half. It was amazing. We'll get to all the details soon, but first, church is over, and I gotta get the heck out of here. I text my friend Nolan and tell him I'm ready to be picked up. Poor guy, he's been wandering around this small town for hours waiting for my text. I'm waiting for Nolan under the same driveway where he dropped me off. I can only imagine what he's thinking as he's pulling in. Jane Whaley is holding her dog Louie, and she has her other arm wrapped around me, and everyone's smiling. I shake the lawyer's hand and thank them. Then Jane reaches inside the car and gives Nolan a big hug. What a weird day. Nolan really wanted to know what happened, and I said, we need to record my thoughts before my memory starts slipping away. I said, let's go find a restaurant and talk. So we pull into a sports bar in Charlotte and asked them if they could turn down the music. Our waitress, Taylor, was amused by our little project.
So what are y'all doing?
We just came back from going to the Word of Faith Fellowship Church. Have you ever heard of these guys?
I have not.
Yeah. Well, you should check them out.
Should I?
They're very interesting.
The way you're laughing, it doesn't think I should check them out.
So what's good here?
All right, dude, you're killing me. So I dropped you off. What happened?
Okay, so the moment you dropped me off, I remember like releasing this big sigh, and then I caught myself thinking, oh my God, no, like they're gonna know I'm like really nervous. Did you hear that? When I just like went, So I got surrounded by the attorneys. Number one, it was Josh Farmer who like reached into the car and kind of like introduced himself, and
yeah, he shook my hand right out of the gate,
Yeah,
right
that
through
guy,
the window.
Right. That guy's name is Josh Farmer, who, by the way, I reached out to him back in season 1, and he never returned my call. I walk in through the door, and I immediately am greeted by Sam. Sam is Jane Whaley's husband. He's the one that, he was the original pastor, right? It was such a warm embrace that I felt all of a sudden. So all that tension that we felt like before I got out of the car, it melted away instantly.
It felt genuine, you felt at ease?
It really did. It disarmed me, and even though that's what I was expecting, right? Look, 2 things could have happened today. We all know, we talked about this earlier, that the last people that were invited, quote unquote, to the church got arrested, okay?
Literally last week.
But dude, I didn't know what was going to happen, okay? That's all I know is that people don't typically get invited to this church, and the last people that did got arrested.
So just spend a few minutes, kind of paint a picture visually of, what these folks kind of looked like. 'Cause I got a quick impression of it just as I drove up. I saw a couple of, people kind of standing by the door and folks coming out of the hallways. I could kind of see down the hallway. Just kind of paint the picture visually of what these folks kind of look like, their dress and whatnot.
Yeah, unfortunately for you, they made us go through the side entrance, right? So when we pulled up to the church, we got greeted by the security, and they quickly made us turn right, where when we were facing the building, they made us turn right when obviously the entrance was left. So you didn't get the benefit of seeing the church members, but they are unmistakable. So if you saw them right here, we're at a restaurant, right? If these look like normal people, right? Normal quote unquote people. You got people wearing shorts and women wearing sleeveless shirts because you know what? It's summer and it's hot. If a Word of Faith member were to walk into this restaurant right now, you would know. Because they wear long sleeves, the women, they're very conservative. A lot of the outfits appear to be homemade, but they're very dated looking. You know what I mean? It almost seems like an 80s, maybe late 70s type of outfit. You know what I mean? Just very shiny material. It just seems very inexpensive material, and their hair is very big. You can tell they wear a lot of hairspray and they curl their hair. It would be unmistakable. And honestly, they wouldn't walk into this bar, right? Because this bar has music and alcohol. So they wouldn't walk in here, but I guarantee you that if you saw them across the street, you would instantly know that this person is probably a Word of Faith member.
I described to Nolan the scene in Jane's office when I met her and her family.
Immediately as I walk in, I'm greeted by all these people, and I'm now in Jane's office, and Jane walks out from the back. And there's a tear flowing down her eye, like she was crying. And she didn't look upset, but then all of a sudden Jane's crying, so I'm thinking, are things going to change now? You know what I mean? Remember, this is the boogeyman that I built up in my head for this whole year. I don't know who she is, really, other than what I've heard from secret recordings and what I've heard in the news. But she greeted me. She gave me a big hug, a really friendly hug. And we hit it off instantly.
No mention of the tear.
I didn't want to address it, but
she didn't say.
She didn't.
Oh, excuse me. I just.
No. It was maybe maybe sometimes your eyes get watery. Sometimes that happens, but it was a clear tear, and I don't know if she was upset or she did mention that she was coming out of a cold or something. So I think that she wasn't feeling well, and she was shorter than I imagined her to be, and she was an older lady. You could tell. This is I have my grandparents are still alive, and she very much reminded me of my grandparents because they're about the same age. In the 70s, and her hands were had arthritis. You could tell. When older people, you could see their veins, and you could just tell that she's an older lady, and it probably I just imagine my grandparents and the amount of energy that it takes to just live day-to-day life. I mean, life gets harder as you get older. So what I saw her do today was pretty incredible. Like, she has stamina. Oh, our food's here.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. That looks awesome. And it's all coming back to me because this is why we're recording now at a restaurant. I mean, obviously there's more ideal places, but I need to get this out of my head, right? Like all these details. Jane and I are walking down this hallway, almost like the tunnel at a stadium, and we're hearing the roar just get louder and louder as we get closer. And all of a sudden we walk through the doors and boom, there is this large room. You know, I've seen pictures of it, and you can see pictures on my website about it, but you only usually see the stage, right? There must have been 400 people there. 400 or 500 people, easily. Okay? There were people that couldn't even fit in the main auditorium, so they were spilling off into that same hallway that we were walking through. And so we cut through this crowd, and I mean, it was just like, you know, like this booming, jubilant singing. There must have been 20 to 30 people on stage, adults, right, of all nationalities, singing at the top of their lungs with microphones. I don't know why they had microphones, because they were so loud. They did not need the microphones. And there are old ladies wearing high heels, jumping up and down. I mean, the energy in this room was electric. I mean, electric. It was not like anything I've ever experienced before. And it was louder than anything I have ever experienced before. And we walk in, and Jane, of course, she's the rock star, right? And so everybody's approaching her and giving her kisses and hugs, and the little kids, and she grabs the little kids and hugs them, and there's so many kids. Like, the kids are just playing in the front of the stage, not playing, but like they're just hanging out, and Jane greets them, and you know, Jane's showing me around. I'm like meeting people, meeting this guy, meeting that guy. I met a Cuban guy. Like, there was a Cuban guy that goes to her church, and he was super nice. Everyone was so nice. I mean, they just looked like they were so glad to see me. And so I was escorted basically by, you know, Josh Farmer, who's the attorney, and he led me to the second row where we're right behind Jane and Sam. So I'm like, basically right in front of me is Sam, her husband, and Jane Whaley. So I'm looking at behind there, and then beyond them is the stage. And I look around, and I mean, everyone was singing from the top of their lungs, like little kids, grown men who looked like somebody's uncle that wouldn't sing, but they were singing. And the women were singing. Everyone was singing. And they looked happy. They looked really, genuinely happy. I was looking around, and like the little kids were singing, and it was just, I couldn't help but smile. And remember, I'm only there observing the place. I'm not going to say amen when they say amen. I'm not going to clap when they sing a song. I'm not going to jump up and down. But I was in the moment. Everything, all my preconceived notions about this place started to unravel. I really started to feel like this is not this cult that everybody's talking about, that this is a church. And then all of a sudden, all these preconceived notions that I've had, everything I've read in the AP about this place, everything that former members have told me, for a moment there, it seemed invalid, right? Because, yeah, because I'm looking around and I'm looking at all these people, and there was, I am not kidding, there was a complete brass section with a French horn, trumpets. I mean, there must have been, at least in the brass section, 5 or 6 people. There was flutes, and there was all sorts of instruments. In fact, I would look around the room, and people were wearing earplugs, like the kind that you would wear, like, you know, if somebody were snoring in the same room, or if you went swimming, because they expected it, like, you know, like for it to be ear piercing. And now you might be wondering, because we spent a lot of time, like in like last time I covered the story, we talked about the blasting prayers, and there was no blasting prayers. Blasting prayers are typically reserved for private purposes only. Like, so they would never do this in front of like an outsider like me. Everything that they were singing were Bible songs, or like just really happy songs. There was like maybe like 3 or 4 songs. And then they invited all the small children on the stage. Now this was a really striking moment. This was a very striking moment to see all the children there all at the same time. And what hit me like right off the bat is how multicultural this church is. I mean, we are in the middle. Where were we? I mean, you were driving around. Where were we today?
It was pretty rural.
And how does rural America typically look?
Yeah, I mean, when I pulled around, I expected it to be, you know, largely, you know, white, and then seeing the way they were dressed, sort of, you know, just all upper middle class white. And then as I even pulled around the church and went to the back, I saw people of sort of, you know, every kind of nationality. It was striking to me as well. It took me aback.
Yeah, well, all those children, there were Asian children, there were Hispanic children, there were white children, African American children. There was a lot of biracial children there. You couldn't cast a more diverse like crowd, right, of children. And then they had the children went off stage.
What did they do when they were on stage? And like, did they come up stage? Were they happy when they? I mean, what was that? What did that look like when they came up?
They were. Okay, so
they ran to the stage. You know what I mean? Like,
it was very orderly. You could tell that they do this a lot. So they walked up to the stage and they sang their song, and they mostly looked happy. And I was examining these kids, right? So one kid obviously had some sort of accident. He had, well, what I know now is road rash. He fell off his bike. That's what they're telling me. And I asked Josh Farmer about it, the lawyer who was sitting next to me, and he's like, yeah, he fell off his bike. And I think it's important that we note that it definitely looked like a little kid accident. Like, my kid had a black eye once. Like, in no way did I ever think that there was like foul play, right? Like these kids were all pretty good looking kids, right? They were dressed like with these like little Donald Duck sailor type suits, you know, like these little like linen like outfits. They're cute kids, right? I did notice that some of the kids had heavy eyelids, which I think is kind of weird for a kid, because, like, you know, you and I probably don't get much sleep, but a kid should get a lot of sleep. So I did notice like 1 or 2 kids like that, but for the most part, these kids look like really well-adjusted, happy kids. So like at first glance, not knowing the context that we know, I did not suspect anything by visibly seeing these kids on stage, right? So when the kids were up there singing, there was a little African-American boy, like he was probably 4 years old, and he's standing there, cute as can be. Well, that little boy had brain cancer. So Jane turns around and whispers in my ear, and she goes, "You see that boy right there? He had some sort of brain cancer, and he was at a hospital, and all the little boys that had brain cancer in his unit, they all died, except for him, because God spoke to Jane, and God told Jane that he was going to get saved, and they must have had some sort of prayer session, like a blasting session, and they ensured that he was going to survive. So all those kids died, but he was saved." That's what she told me. It was, you know, I don't know what you say to that.
He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac.
And so then after these kids exit the stage, a large group, maybe 40 adults, walk up to the stage, and they're holding signs. And they're holding signs of the country where they've come from. And it was a big international presence there. And I wrote down, this is when I started writing down the quote, writing down my notes, because there's no way I could remember all these countries. But these are the countries that I saw represented: Cuba, Cambodia, Mexico, Ghana, Ireland, Sweden, Scotland, Switzerland, Denmark, Greece, Vietnam. And so they went around each country and they sang whatever song they were singing in the language of their country. It was like this huge multicultural thing, and it was so unexpected. And, I asked Josh...
They said they do this every week?
That's what they say. And everyone was super into it, man.
It's like a Olympics opening ceremony or something.
It looked like the Olympics opening ceremony. So I asked Josh Farmer, who's the attorney that represents the church, who was, I guess, the unfortunate fellow that had to watch everything I did, because he was looking over my notes. He was made sure that every time I texted you to make sure that I was okay. He was on me, man, like white on rice. But we also had some friendly exchanges. He was very nice. And I asked him, I said, I made this observation, wow, this is very multicultural. I just wasn't expecting that. And he's like, yeah, this is a reason why we get so much heat, because we are in a rural white American town where the Southern Baptists, they don't like the fact that we have interracial kids. They don't like the fact that our ministers and our leaders are female. And he's like, if we were in any other town, if we were in Charlotte, or if we were in Oklahoma City or in Tulsa, we would just be a normal church. But the community has turned on them, according to Josh Farmer, because of their diversity and their empowerment of women.
It's an interesting take.
You weren't expecting that, were you?
Is that the only time that you heard that being the take, or did that get reinforced at all? That's like the narrative behind why they're catching flack, or is that just once that you heard that? 'Cause I don't think. Have you heard that before?
That was the first time that I really heard that argument before, and it was reinforced later on in the day. Okay, so this was a funny moment. Okay, the choir, I guess for lack of a better term, is singing in full volume. I mean, it's super loud. Jane's right in front of me, and Jane would serve as this commentator throughout the whole thing. She would turn around and come whisper in my ear, and she would you see that guy over there? You see that guy who's singing? And I said, yeah. And she goes, he used to be Paul McCartney's drummer. And I go, oh, cool, because for me, I thought that was cool, but I realized that for her, listening to music is not cool. She goes, yeah, well, he came here seeking deliverance, and he no longer plays drums. He was in all that drugs and alcohol and stuff, and now he's been saved. And so I realized that what I thought was cool, that he was a drummer with Paul McCartney, is not a cool thing, and he's now been saved.
The cool thing is not that he's the drummer, it's that she saved the drummer.
Yes, she saved the drummer. And then in the process, I realized that she doesn't like drums. Apparently, drums are a bad thing, and I will do research to find out why drums were bad. But I looked back at that huge band, and there was no drummer. The only percussion were the tambourines, and I don't even know how those got by. Then all the men came up, and that was so then it turned into Gaston's Tavern from Beauty and the Beast, man. These booming voices singing these powerful church songs, and it was just impressive, right? And then the older men leave, and that's when the energy in the room starts dying down a little bit. After the men exit the stage, Sam Whaley, Jane's husband, who's sitting right in front of me, he gets up and he approaches the podium and he gives a sermon. And he's so disarming. He's so charming and funny. So Sam Whaley, before he left the podium, he introduced new families that were there. Some people had brought their parents to the church visiting. And then he he exits the stage, and up comes Jane Whaley to the podium, and she looks at me, and she says, and we have a special guest today, and his name is Javier Leyva, and he has a radio show, and he's here to observe, right? And I get up, and I wave at the crowd, and I say, thank you for having me. And everybody was super happy that I was there. And and she said she listened to some of my episodes, and that she's always wanted to reach out to me, but didn't know how. And she said that God spoke to her, and when I emailed her, she knew that she needed to talk to me, and that's why she responded. So Jane has listened to my earlier episodes, and that did not stop her from reaching out. You know, I asked her, you know, have you ever been interviewed before? And she said, no, never. She said Inside Edition came in the 90s and they wanted to do the story, but instead we didn't want to talk to them, so they did this expose and smeared them. And since then, she hasn't talked to a reporter. And so the fact that I was invited to the church was a pretty big moment. In fact, I told, you know, another reporter in town that I got invited to the church, and like, she was shocked, because this is not the way it works. Like, people don't go visit Jane Whaley, especially people from the media. This was really interesting for me because she's such a dynamic character that I thought that was going to translate to being on stage, but actually she seemed a little nervous, which really caught me off guard. And she seemed a little, I don't know if it was unprepared, but she just kept saying, you know, all right, go to the, you know, go to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, and then you would hear the paper shuffling, you know, like the whole, everybody was following along, and then Revelations chapter 1, verse 5, and 1 Peter chapter 1, all this happened within, like, it seemed like a minute. She was just jumping around the Bible, and like, it wasn't like this charismatic like speech that I would imagine somebody like her would deliver. It was very like, all right, we're gonna read hand-selected Bible verses and like not give context. If any of the context was like, you know, we got to stick together. You know, if we don't stick together, you know, we fall into temptation like Adam and Eve. You know, fell into temptation, but God has a plan, and there is a way out, and it's to follow the Word of God. And that she said she's a nobody. She said she's a nobody, do not have pride, that there's only one way, and that's the way of God. And honestly, nothing she said really was alarming, because, I mean, she was reading out of the Bible, and I've been to other churches, and I've been to very conservative churches, and I mean, that's what the Bible says. And I didn't feel like she was distorting the Bible in any way, you know? But I did find it weird at how cold it was and how much back and forth there was. And during this time, I did look at the crowd, and I was trying to gauge whether people were following along, and everybody was young kids, like in their teens, and like older men. Everybody was tracking with her as she would flip back and forth. Everybody was tracking with her. It's not what you would expect.
Yeah, I don't know what I would expect. So far we've basically got a bunch of songs, Big Rockstar entrance, a bunch of songs. Sam, was he preaching, or was he sort of just kind of telling jokes and working the crowd, kind of like? I
mean, no, he did a prayer.
Okay. And then you've got Jane, who kind of flipped through some Bible verses. When did all the stuff that we hear about, the jumping and the crazy, you know, the yelling and all that, I mean, how did we get into that at any point? Or?
It never happened. It never happened. Nothing from this ceremony like was unusual. Like, it was very unremarkable, other than the sheer volume of the music. There was nothing out of the ordinary. I want to like I came prepared thinking that there's going to be blasting and like people falling to the ground and like slapping.
No
foreheads.
speaking in tongues.
No speaking in tongues.
No jumping around.
I mean, there was jumping around, like they were jumping to the music.
To the music, but other than the music, like there was no like prayer session. There was no people falling down, like you were just saying. Like there's no people coming up to the stage and being saved in droves and
none of that. None of that. I mean, so
you were in there for 2.5 hours in the service. How far in are you when you're talking about Jane?
This is towards the end. It felt more like a concert than a church service. The actual church service came afterwards, which it was kind of a letdown in a way because there was so much energy at the beginning, and I mean, I was getting into it. And then when Jane came, it kind of stopped. There was a point when she was done flipping around the Bible that she lit up the room. She kind of let loose and people started smiling and laughing. It was when she was telling the story about her family. So when she talked about her family vacation that they just came from, they just took a beach vacation, and she talked about her some baby, and then they talked about the dog, Louis was there, and Louis is a character, and, she really started becoming more human, right? And people, the crowd really responded to that. It was very warm. So Jane Whaley does her thing, and then she says, all right, well, it's about 12 o'clock now, and service started at 9:30, and it was time to wrap it up, and that was it. It was over. It was over.
After the service was over, Jane grabbed my hand and told me that she wanted me to meet some people.
What happened after that? How did you get escorted? I mean, you texted me.
Yeah, so after that, as soon as it was over, Jane returns to where she was sitting, right by me, and everyone who was coming off the stage greeted her and kissed her and Sam and told Grandma, I love you, Grandma, because they call her Grandma and they call Sam Grandpa, and then they gave her kisses, and it was a very warm exchange, and then she introduced me to more people, and then immediately, it's almost like she wanted to confront all the accusations. Without me, I never even had to bring it up. Remember, my game plan was to play nice, earn her trust. I wasn't going to bring up any controversial things. And she goes, I want you to meet Matthew Fenner's brother, who you will learn later on in the season, is the boy at the time. He was like a boy who got, says that he got beaten by Brooke, Jane's adopted daughter, and 4 other ministers. And they're going to trial. She brought over Matthew's brother, and she goes, tell him that it was all a lie, that Matthew was lying. And he goes, yep, it was all a lie. I was there. Matthew was lying. And then, I mean, this all happened. I want you to understand, I want the listeners to understand that this all took place within maybe 5 minutes. This is like, as people are exiting the church, they're approaching us. And it's almost like they lined them up just for me.
Then Jane introduces me to Jamie's brother. Jamie, who you heard from earlier in the season, is the man who confronted his mother at the forum.
They brought over Jamie's brother, and really, good-looking dude. Like he comes up to me, he goes, yep, my brother is lying. Everything he says is a lie. I haven't been allowed to record anything to this point. Like when they said stop recording, I stopped recording. All right, I honored that. I don't think I had to, but I chose to respect that because I wanted to earn their trust. But I'm like thinking, is this it? Like, are they gonna kick me out at this point? Am I gonna get to talk to Jane? And I said, and I didn't even actually have to ask. They're like, come with me. We want to sit down and talk to you. So Jane grabbed me by the hand, and we walked together, and hand in hand, and we walked back to her office, back down that long hallway that we came in through.
I'm not going to rush you. I just want you to let you know my manager has to turn the volume on for the game.
Oh, yeah.
The waitress, Taylor, comes back to our table and tells us, it's time to go.
It's on outside.
So we have to leave the restaurant.
Don't worry. You want to pick it up back in the car? Yeah.
All right, that's fine.
Nolan starts the recorder back up.
All right, we're back on it.
Okay, so I apologize if we end up using this audio, but it's just that I need to get this out of my head. You know what I mean? Like, we have to talk about it now. That's why we recorded at a restaurant, and that's why we're recording in the car.
As I was talking to Nolan, I get a call from Shanna Muse.
This might be why you're about to see.
Oh, Shanna Muse. Can I take this real quick?
Yeah, but you might want
Shanna is a woman who lost her children to the church in a custody battle.
Hey, Shanna, how's it going?
Right lane to take exit. Right, sorry, I didn't recognize your number earlier.
It's okay. And you know what? I want to apologize like a million times.
You see, I kind of stood Shanna up. We were supposed to meet with her today, but then when Jane Whaley invited me to the church, I tried calling Shanna to tell her plans had changed, but couldn't get a hold of her. So we missed our meeting.
I was invited at the very last minute yesterday to one of the services at Word of Faith. Like Jane invited me. Yeah, I was very surprised.
So you went this morning?
Yeah, I went this morning. Sorry if you hear
Let me tell you what you saw.
You want to tell me what I saw? Tell me what I saw.
I can tell you.
All right, what did I see?
I can tell you. Okay. So they have a bunch of smiling faces. Now, I haven't been there since 2002, but they always did this when visitors. Smiling, happy people. And so then probably they may have had some announcements, and then the kids all came out, the little kids, and sang.
Yes.
Am I on the right track?
You are on the right track.
And then came some, maybe up the middle schoolers, and then they had some praise and worship, and then maybe Jane read from the Bible a little bit, and probably mentioned that you were there.
Yes.
And welcomed you.
This is kind of creepy, actually.
And then it was over, right?
And then it was over. Very unremarkable.
Ask any ex-member what happened today when you went to the church, because that's what we did when visitors came. We put on a facade, but if you weren't there, Javier, somebody would have got bashed. Might have been for hours. They may have been told how wicked they were, having them stand up in front of the crowd, They would never do that with you, Vicar, because you weren't ready. They don't want to cast their pearls before you're swine,
Right.
Sorry if that was hard to understand, but that's so weird. Shanna described exactly what I experienced, play by play.
What you just described is exactly what I just described to Nolan, because I know we've been together all day, but I actually haven't had a chance to really walk him through moment by moment. But it is so weird that you called right now and you described exactly. Did she not describe everything I just told you?
In sequence.
A leopard don't change her spots, and in this case, a witch don't change her spots. She's going to put the smiling faces forward for you to see, and then you're going to be puzzled, what are these ex-members talking about? But if you were to go and be a member, it would be a total different story.
Let me challenge you on that, right? Because Jane Whaley and I started interacting through email late Friday night. It was 2:00 in the morning when she sent me an email. I didn't respond till Saturday. So all this happened basically within a 24-hour period. You're telling me that within that 24-hour period that they were able to orchestrate this show for me? I mean, everyone looked like they were really into it, genuinely into it.
They've been orchestrating it for over 20 years. I mean, come on. They know what to do when visitors are there. Put on your smile, happy. The ones that can't are in some closet somewhere, probably, off the campus now. We used to put them in the lower building, but you didn't see every member today. I can promise you that. There's people on church discipline, children, probably either up in the school building, or in people's homes now because of all the investigations. You did not see every person to that, every child,
Do they send out an announcement that I'm coming? How do they communicate this? Because, if everyone was in on the act, how many people, there might have been 500, 400 people in that auditorium. They were all in on it. They looked really into it.
They know every face of every member, every first and last name of every member. Now, there were times I didn't know there was a guest. Maybe they were up front and I was sitting to the back. But, by the time Jane announced it, I already knew, okay, that's why nobody got screamed at or nobody got, put down in front of the whole congregation, or that's why we didn't pray today and do all that screaming and blasting. Oh, now I know because there was a guest up front. Sooner or later she's going to let know. Did she say anything about you being there? We have a guest.
Oh yeah, just the way you described it. I mean, in the order that you described it.
Yeah, but most of the time, if you came in the back, all the people in the back would see you and know. That's right. Smile, happy. We're all happy people. Whereas if there were no guests, for me it was fear. Every time I walked into that church, am I the one that's going to get called out? Am I going to be the one that's told to get the heck out of the back of the church?
I don't know how to bring this next part up. It involves Shanna, and I don't want to upset her.
So something interesting happened, and I wanted to talk to you about it. I met your son. He was paraded in front of me. Yeah.
Jane introduced me to Shanna's son named Justin. You see, Shanna has 4 kids, and when she left the church, only 3 of those children eventually left with her. Justin was the only one who stayed behind.
Justin was, approached me, and Jane basically asked him, if everything you have said and everything that the Coopers have said about him are true, and he unequivocally up and down swore that you were lying, and that he referred to you as your biological mother, and kind of alluding to the fact that his real parents are in the church, and it hurt me in proxy to you because I was trying to put myself in your shoes at that moment. That was a real moving moment for me, and I honestly didn't even know what to ask him. I was really caught off guard. Does that surprise you in any way, or?
Why would they put Justin in front of you? Why would they make sure Justin? They didn't know me and you even knew each other, did we? Or we're talking, or?
It's almost like they paraded in front of me everyone who has attacked the church.
She assured me that she still hopes that Justin will leave someday. I mean, she never thought her other 3 kids would leave, and they did.
Oh, I'm not giving up all hope on him, They got Justin married off right away. They got him a truck, and apparently Justin's really into the clothes and stuff like that. So they're really feeding what he likes, and poor baby. I just feel bad for him, I feel so sad about his childhood, and it's my fault, and we even ended up at that dump. I call it a dump, but, it's just, he'll get his head together, I'm not giving up hope on him. All right, well, maybe we'll talk again, Javier.
Yeah, we will.
Bye.
For sure. Thank you so much.
All right, have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
After getting off the phone with Shanna, Nolan still had questions.
So I just got to ask you, because we just got off the phone with Shanna, and I think what was most striking was probably the very beginning, right? She started right out of the gate by basically recapping exactly what you just finished telling me, literally, in the last 10.
We got kicked out of the restaurant, right? And I'm still trying to explain to you in detail just to get it out of my head, what went on today. And suddenly we're driving and I get a call from Shanna, and she recounted play by play exactly what I experienced. And that was pretty telling to me because it was exactly in the order that I experienced everything.
So I got to ask you, your impression, when you were retelling it to me, you're hard to read, and I didn't get a chance to kind of dig in deeper because we weren't finished kind of with the telling, but hearing her recount that in that type of detail, what is your feeling about your whole experience today at Word of Faith?
I got to tell you, while I was there, I was thinking, what's the big deal? Now that I'm seeing it with my own eyes.
Even knowing, going down there, we were saying it was going to be a dog and pony show, but they were able to have that level of, you looked genuine when you were expressing to me that it was warm and it felt genuine. It seemed like you really felt that way.
I really did, yeah. I really felt that way because in my mind, I'm thinking, we've been in contact for less than 24 hours, okay? How in the world was she able to get like 15 band members with brass, and like, how is she able to get everyone to look like they were genuinely having a great time? She had 24 hours to prepare for this, right? She contacted me, Saturday, like, in the middle of the night, and today is Sunday, like, she had less than 24 hours to prepare for this. In my head, I'm thinking, did she really like go to everyone and like say, hey, look happy? I mean, I've directed actors before in my past when I directed commercials. It is very hard to make people look genuinely happy.
Once.
Like, as a photographer, you can't say, hey, smile and get
If they've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah, because Shanna has not been in this church for 16 years, and she was able to recount exactly what I did. So either...
Meaning the kids that were singing on stage when Shanna was going to the service are now adults, potentially, or young adults. So these are this has been going on for...
Yeah, so, I guess what I'm gathering, even just like from talking to Shanna, is that they've done this a million times, right? So like they know what to do. So if a visitor is coming, boom, you switch into visitor mode. And but one thing I can't prove is that what Shanna's saying is right, because like I've only seen the happy. I mean, it looked like a Hallmark special.
And that's what they're counting on, right? I would guess, if it's true, right? We want to assume, but that's if they're saying. The only people who are saying all this negative stuff are people who have left the church, who are saying bad things about us. Anyone who ever comes to a service who isn't a part of the church sees the Hallmark special, the opening ceremony.
But then again, I have a clip, and I'll play it now, actually, of Jane kind of berating a boy for playing sports.
And I was told today that you have such a devil with this ball, even your ball socks, your ball shoes, everything. It's coming out of you. So be aware of it. It's called Satanism. It's coming out.
Because he wants balls on his son.
It better not be. We just dealt with a major soccer devil down in Brazil 2 weeks ago. It's not going to be. We will have no other gods. We just read that. That's of the devil. Why do we play ball?
So like that, what Shanna described as in using the pulpit as a way to beat up, not physically, but like verbally attack her church members. I mean, there is evidence to support that, right? Next time on Pretend Radio, things are about to get really interesting. Jane Whaley invites me to her office for a private hour-and-a-half conversation. It was a jaw-dropping interview. She answered just about every controversial issue facing the church. And we talk about the future of the church. This is John Huddle, a former member, reacting to my interview with Jane. Let's just put it this way. He was a little disturbed.
After hearing what you said and knowing how meticulous and deliberate she is with her words, I'm concerned. Jane does not say things lightly. She has a purpose in everything she says. And for her to say that to you is disturbing me.
If you can't wait, the next episode is already up on Patreon. Just visit pretendradio.org and hit the donate button. Plus, I added a bonus episode on Paul McCartney's drummer, Joe English. Here's a preview.
I just think about coming here when I met Jane Whaley, and she could see that I was a troubled man. In the world, they all want to hear about your history with Paul McCartney and Wings. They want to know about that side. She wanted to help me because she knew that I had problems.
Also, I just received an email from the church attorney, Josh Farmer, asking me to take down these last 2 episodes because he claims that our meeting was off the record. Well, that's not going to happen. I would have never agreed to an off-the-record meeting. Here's my response. Josh, thank you for reaching out. This is an acknowledgement that I received your email. I want to inform you that I have no plans on altering my reporting. I would have never agreed to an off-the-record meeting. In fact, in my first email to Jane Whaley, I wrote, and I quote, "My offer is for you to speak to my listeners directly," unquote. That means on the record. Jane Whaley responded and said she needed to check with her attorneys. A few emails later, she invited me to attend service. Never did she mention that the recordings were not part of the agreement. After first greeting Mrs. Whaley and her family, I captured the first few minutes of our meeting. When I asked Mrs. Whaley if I could continue recording, she said she would like to get to know me better.
Before we get too far, is it okay if I record throughout my day just to kind of
No.
Okay.
No recording.
Okay.
We got to get to know each other.
Okay, but then maybe afterwards, can we have a couple words?
I'll meet with you afterwards.
Okay.
After the service, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Soon after, I turned off the recorder and I only recorded one song from the service. And if you recall, you were the one who offered me a copy of the service. I recorded the first song simply as a backup. As far as the recorded conversations, well, I only captured the first few minutes of my entrance into the building, and I held a microphone in plain sight. You can confirm this by listening to the crisp audio quality. Never was my microphone concealed, and you were never tricked. I would like to remind you that you invited a journalist on the record to observe your church. If you don't like the way I depicted our conversation, well, you're welcome to come on my show anytime you like and make your case. Thank you for your concern. Javier Leiva. I'll see you next week.
Creative Babble.